Today, we're going to dive into the internet's little dirty secret, digital blackface. Stick around as we discuss the implications and impact of digital blackface in today's digital world.
So welcome back to another episode of The Adventures of Cece and Hass. And this is probably not a new concept for a lot of you guys, but this is something that our son brought to our attention on his last visit home. And we just thought that we would do a little research on it. And it was very interesting to us, some of the things that we found.
Right. But before we can discuss digital blackface, we need to discuss the origins of blackface, right? So, blackface is the practice of non-black performers using burnt cork or makeup to portray a caricature of black people on stage or in some sort of entertainment arena.
Wow.
You know? This was predominantly portrayed in minstrel shows in the 1800s.
Wow. And I think the origin came from Europe. Am I correct about that?
I believe so, yeah. Originally shown during the Othello stage play, because I don't believe they had black actors performing in theater. So the Othello in the Shakespeare was a white guy in blackface.
So, but would it didn't necessarily have the implications that it became in America when it started out in Europe, because they probably was just, do you think they were just trying to just portray black people, or do you think they weren't necessarily caricatures of black people like it kind of evolved into in the United States?
It was a total different way that they did it in Europe. However, I do believe that the Europeans traveled with a minstrel show as well, because minstrel shows became very popular in the 1800s. And that's in, minstrel shows, or minstrelsy as they called it back then, was an American theater form, that was developed comically portraying racial stereotypes of African Americans.
Right, yeah. And that's what I was trying to get clarity on, if it was when it started in Europe, if it started out as to make fun of black people. But it really didn't start out like that. It just became that in America, where they started portraying black people as lazy and buffoonish and a myriad of other things, cowardly, superstitious, all of these things that were very negative.
Happy-go-lucky.
Right, yeah.
Each show of that minstrel period consisted of comic skits, variety shows. They were dancing, they were doing music performances, and they were usually depicting people that were specifically of African descent.
Wow. And I think during our research, we also found out that there were 8 archetypes of the black caricatures that were portrayed in these minstrel shows. And the first one was Jim Crow, and he was basically a dancing around, singing type caricature. And the actor, who I can't recall his name, it was a white Irishman, I believe. And he was, at that time, he actually became as famous as the Queen of England.
Yeah, at that time, he was the second most popular image at that time was Queen of England and Jim Crow.
Think about that for a minute, okay?
Exactly. Number 2 was the Zip Coon.
Right.
Zip Coon archetype was after slaves were freed and the black men were pursuing a life in America, and they were, white folks found a way to belittle the freed black man who was seeking to have a life of his own and to create a world of his own. And they often pictured him as misusing English improperly, wearing certain clothes that depicted someone who was of a certain status, but was, it was somewhat used to portray them as clowns.
Right. Kind of like how you would think of like a kid playing dress up. Like, they don't really know what they're doing. They just have on all this fancy stuff. And it's put together in this tacky way. And also, I think they also had an aspect of uppityness to it. We all know, we've all heard that term, uppity. And
right.
Kind of just basically...
Don't know your place.
Right. Don't know your place.
Yeah.
And kind of basically making these black people who were seeking education and to kind of rise into simpletons almost,
Right. The number 3 archetype was the mammy, and her whole existence was for the betterment of her the white people that she served.
Right.
She was almost... she was someone who didn't take any mess off anyone. Mm-hmm. She told them where to get off at and where to get on. Mm-hmm. And so, she was highly trusted. But they felt like her whole existence was just to serve them. Mm-hmm. And, I didn't realize that through that assessment that she was also considered to be asexual. Mm. Like, as if she wasn't getting no booty while they weren't looking.
Yeah. Tipping around with the gardener.
Right. She was definitely getting her needs met, I'm sure. Just because she was up when you woke up and was listening for every time you rang that bell.
Right.
Doesn't mean that she wasn't finding a way to get her needs met.
But the mammy has been an archetype that has survived. I feel like it's one of the main ones that have survived throughout our history, which all of them have to some degree. But, because you see that portrayed as the nanny now. We use the word nanny, and then you look at The Help with Viola Davis, where this black woman's entire existence is to serve this white family. And then there's that whole thing. I remember we were rewatching The Paperboy. Mm-hmm. With David Oyelowo, and mm-hmm. I can't remember the white actor, it had Nicole Kidman in it, and there was another white actor, and I just remember that Macy Gray played their maid, and she was like the chewing gum, wisecracking, she just said everything, and she got away with everything, but at the same time, she was subjugated. Like, there was times where their father in The Paperboy would kind of subjugate her, like, oh girl, you can't leave, you're not gonna leave, or like that guy told her, I don't want your black hair in my food, so it was like this kind of almost a love-hate relationship where they got away with stuff, but at the same time they were definitely subjugated.
Sure. So number 4 archetype is the Uncle Tom, right? And that was the guy who was for all better purposes, the house Negro. There was the difference of the field Negroes and the house Negro. And that house Negro, definitely rejoiced in his position mm-hmm. as being the master's favorite. Right. And often, to his own interest, would follow everything, align himself with every single willing need of the master.
Right.
If it doesn't matter the detriment of his own community.
And he was even, a lot of times he was even worse than like an overseer, because it was like, if he saw the black people doing anything, stealing a little crumb of something, or maybe they just did anything, he was right back there to report to his master. But it was almost aligned in a sense of almost like having a dog, like a trained dog was like the equivalent of the way they portrayed this caricature in the minstrel theater. Was like, he does everything, I train him to do this, and he does exactly this thing, on my behalf. And of course, we all know the most famous of all Uncle Tom was Samuel Jackson
in Django Unchained. My God, he played the hell out of that part.
Yeah, I kind of disliked him for a minute after that, because I was like, he played that character a little bit too well, Samuel. A little too well,
Yeah. So then the number 5 archetype is the buck. Mm-hmm. And we saw the buck in Mandingo.
Right, the movie.
Where, he's this big, hulking, strong black guy, but, he's constantly drooling over the white woman.
Right.
Like the white woman is the prize.
Well, they made it the different. I must say that in Mandingo, it was the white women who were kind of pursuing him for sexual purposes. So he was kind of subjugated to that. But in the character of the minstrel show, they make it kind of turn it around to make it seem like he's the one that's like, where all the white women at? All the time. And so you're kind of like, okay,
Right. And so number 6 brings us to number 6, which is the Jezebel. And the Jezebel is the over-sexualized, wench that is sole purpose is for the white man's or the white master's
fantasy or
exactly.
Sexual use and fantasies.
That's it. That they are only used for that. And then, we see how that Jezebel archetype has lasted to the 21st century.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the reasons why I think black women are hypersexualized, is because of these old archetypes of how we were portrayed,
Yeah.
But I did want to say that, I did want to say that it's interesting to think that the Jezebel and the wench were played by white men. Because, back in the day, men dominated theater. They weren't, there weren't a lot of female actors, or it wasn't considered a proper job for a white woman or whatever. And then to be in this theater, and it's just something a little strange about a white man playing a hypersexualized his idea of a hypersexualized black woman in particular. And that's almost like the height of white patriarchy playing out.
That is how they imagine black people to behave.
Yeah.
And so, they're playing this part that is not necessarily how we are.
Exactly. I mean, that was true of all of the characters, but in particular, playing the woman, I just thought that was, I don't know, it's just something about that like, you're, not only are you not black, but you're also not a woman, and then you're putting off your white patriarchal ideas onto this person. But hey, whole thing, the whole minstrel theater was messed up. So
there was a problem with it.
Yeah.
Let's see. And then number 7 was the tragic mulatto.
Yeah.
And she was not quite white, but had bought into that one drop of black blood made you into a black person, but highly aligned herself with white people and white men and pursued white men, and it made her feel like she was having some type of status by having a white man. And I believe that the mulatto just kind of felt like they had a better position in life because of the color of their skin.
But that's what made her tragic, was because society wasn't ever going to allow her to have the life of a proper white woman, for lack of a better term. And so that's why she was considered tragic, because she was never going to be allowed that, regardless of how she looked. Although she did, in a lot of cases people did pass, but what that meant, they had to leave behind everything.
Yeah, that's right. So they couldn't go back to their families.
They could not, and if they wanted to risk death or something worse, that was a choice. I mean, I even know of a story told to me by your grandmother about a woman who did just that very thing. In fact, her family encouraged her to do it. Her mother said, "You have a chance to live a life of privilege that you wouldn't have if you stay in this black family." And so they gave each other up and moved on. But I think they did reunite in the 70s. Yeah, crazy.
And number 8, and the final archetype, is the pickaninny.
Yeah.
Or the Sambo.
Right.
Whereas children that are depicted with wild hair and eating watermelon, and things of the sort like that.
Yeah. And a famous one that you may remember is Lovecraft Country, where the little girl had been cursed by the white police officer, and I found it very ironic because she was actually cursed with the images of what white people think she is. Mm-hmm. When you turn that around, mm-hmm. Because she was actually turning into a pickaninny, for lack of a better, you know what I'm saying? And that's like, the fear of you're being judged, and this is what society thinks you are, and this is what you're going to become.
Exactly.
So I thought that was a powerful, powerful thing for them to put in Lovecraft Country to represent that.
And we talk about in our episode about Black horror.
Oh yeah.
Check that out. We go over how the Black horror is a depiction of the tragedies that Black people live in everyday life.
Absolutely.
So take a look at that. But let's get into this. Now let's get into this digital blackface and how it is presented on the internet, right? So digital blackface is a concept that's gaining traction in our culture. Mm-hmm. It was originally phrased by Adam Clayton Powell III, who originally called it high-tech blackface in relation to how Black people were depicted in video games, right? But however, it was not until 2017 when Lauren Michelle Jackson coined the actual term digital blackface.
Right. And Lauren Michelle Jackson is a feminist, so if you want to, Google her, definitely do that, because she has a lot of great feminist essays out there.
Correct. Now, it refers to the use of digital content such as memes, GIFs, emojis, and Imagine Black English. And, if you're not familiar with Imagine Black English, that will be a term. I can't remember the guy who coined the term, but it's used as how another race would imagine, the English is used.
Right. So, like when you see these videos of, say, white women who, like we saw one recently where a white woman, she's sitting there eating a bag of Cheetos and she's pretending to be Shaquanda, and then she's making up all of these words, and she's talking about, yeah, girl, he went down to the store and he did this right here and did that. You know what I'm saying? Just kind of making a total mockery of how Black people speak.
Correct. And so digital blackface is a practice where white people co-opt online expressions of Black imagery, slang, catchphrases, and culture to convey comic relief or a way to offload their emotions onto Black bodies. Mm-hmm. Excessive emotion, so happy, so ghetto, so sassy, so loud. Yeah. Everything is like dialed up, by 10.
Right.
It's a ridiculous practice that just continues to be perpetuated.
Right. And there's also a couple additional ways, actually, that besides the emojis and the memes and so forth, there's also where people will create fake accounts to pretend to be Black for just the purpose of creating like social chaos, for lack of a better term. And
Correct.
The famous one was Dean Browning. Mm-hmm. And he created this account called Dean Purdy. This was
he was a political candidate
in Pennsylvania, right? And he thought he was tweeting from his. He actually thought he was tweeting from his burner blackface account, and he actually tweeted from his real account, and that's how the whole thing got found out. So my message is, look, old white guys, if you don't know how to use the internet, you might not want to be putting out racist stuff or creating fake accounts, okay?
Correct. So the second way is using AAVE, which is African American Vernacular English, which is used to sound cool, but ultimately is a mockery to Black people.
Right, and you know what that means? We've been bilingual all this time, and we just didn't know it. You know what I'm saying? Like we called it. We kind of started learning early on. It was called code switching, because you don't always speak the same way that you speak when you're home. When you're at home and comfortable around certain people, when you go to your job or you answer the phone, or, my kids used to always call it the telephone voice. You say, oh, Mom's on the telephone. I didn't have to tell them I was on the phone. They're like, Mom's on the phone, because, I would be speaking a certain way. And we called it code switching, but really, we were toggling between those different dialects. And I think that I would even go as far as to say that we probably have different dialects because you grew up in the black city. I grew up in the black South. So there's different nuances to the languages in that way too. But the basis is that we've been bilingual, guys, and we did not know it.
Correct.
Till recently. So there.
So the problem with digital blackface lies in a perpetuation of many long-held stereotypes about black people. By using imagery or expressions of different race, individuals unknowingly contribute to the reinforcement of this harmful biases.
Mm-hmm. But why is this such a big deal, though? Why is this?
I mean, how often have you seen memes, emojis, GIFs of people of color being used on social media, or imagined black English used on the radio or TV? Mm-hmm. You know?
Right.
I mean, yeah, I know that it may be a way, they're attempting to connect with the youth of today because, you know, I believe that black people have controlled the identity of a lot of the youth, you know, and so we see how much it has been an impact on them by way of how the mainstream have tried to use it to connect with the youth, you know, but it still is not a really great use.
Well, I mean, I think the main problem is because it tends to trivialize, marginalize communities, and also our pain that we feel. You know, it tends to reduce our emotion and pain into a soundbite or a meme, you know, or a gift. And you know, and I often think about the story. This was a few years back, but Kimberly Sweet Brown Wilkins, I think so. And you know, she was saying the thing about ain't nobody got time for that. But and I will admit, it was a funny.
It was funny.
The interview they did of her on the news, it was funny. But the thing is that this woman's house had just burned down,
right?
And she was just expressing herself. She was probably numb, you know, she was probably in a state of shock, you know, because we've all been there, just like even in this very video, we're laughing at certain things, but it's certainly not funny. This is a painful history for black people.
She was definitely talking from her gut.
Yeah.
With that, you know, that was her truth that she was living. And, you know, that is the place that manipulated or uncurated experience that you have when people just say those type of experiences, and it's a true experience, a true expression.
Yeah.
You know, but it is they're coming from a place of pain. They're coming from a place of shock. Yeah. You know, and then it's turned around and used, you know, in a way of comic relief. You know, by a different group of people, it tends to be a mockery.
And I think one of the famous ones, of course, is Antoine Dotson. Now, I know that's good, taking it way back. But something about that always bothered me because because unlike, I feel like that Kimberly Sweet Brown was sort of kind of trying to be a little bit, she was upset, but I feel like she was probably intentionally trying to be funny a little bit. But Antoine Dotson was not trying to be funny. He was talking about, you know, one of his family members had been raped and attacked in this public housing, and nobody was providing safety and security for them. And he was just really saying what was honest. You know, he was giving an honest, in that moment, he was not being funny. He was expressing pain. You know, we need to be safe. Hide your kids, hide your wives, hide your husband. And it came out sounding funny, but in that fun, I mean, I couldn't stop laughing. but yeah, absolutely. But in that fun, he really was giving a warning. He was trying to warn his community. He was also speaking out to the news people because nobody was listening.
Bringing attention
to something very serious.
Exactly.
It was happening to these people. And I know that there's some controversy around whether or not
he made a lot of money off of it, even though he was being exploited.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
They made a whole song over his pain. He did make a lot of money off of it.
I mean, I don't know how much. I bet he didn't make as much money as those white boys that did it. made off of it. And I also think that it's still kind of reduced, even though I know, and that's the controversy, guys. What do you guys think? Do you think that just because Antoine Dotson made money off of that it still was some form of digital blackface in a way, because he was somewhat exploited? You know, and the thing is that even to this day, which we should have researched this, actually, we don't know if they solved that problem about the people being raped in that house, because nobody cared. All anybody cared about was his meme and how he was saying it, and that it was funny. And so I think that that's part of that's where that gray area and that complexity lies with the digital blackface, is because some of these things that people say are funny. Like, it is funny to see, you know, I know they talked about the Tyra explosion was a big one, you know, Tyra Banks on Top Model exploded. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we always talk about Oprah, you know, you get a car, you get a car, you get a car, you know, always talk about, but to me, that was not necessarily as bad, but the question is why are those images the ones that are always chosen to express these emotions? Why you can't use, you know, Becky from Round the Way or Karen that lived Barbecue Karen? Why aren't they used as, you know, as those types of expressions? So that's Absolutely. Where the complexity, it's definitely a complexity, guys. And we would love to hear from you guys to know what you guys think about it.
I mean, it's crucial to understand the harm it can cause and why we need to address this issue head on. By participating in digital blackface, we are essentially erasing the lived experiences and identities of marginalized people. It's essential to be aware of the implications of our online behavior to strive to create a more inclusive digital environment. You know?
Right. And we know that you guys are hanging out with some Karens and some Beckys and some Mandys and some Blaines, I don't know, but you know, the point is that if you are in a setting where you have an opportunity to break these things down to people, because sometimes, you know, people do things that are not necessarily, I don't think that all white people are setting out to say, I'm just going to humiliate and, you know, adapt these digital blackface things just because I'm racist or whatever. I think sometimes a lot of it is in ignorance, you know. A lot of times they just don't know that what they're doing, or they don't know that it's been taken out of context. Or sometimes we do know, but we have to kind of question ourselves. We have to ask ourselves, why am I doing this? And so when you have that opportunity to talk to people, to spread the information around so that people can understand that Black people are real people. We are not caricatures of our lives.
Right.
This is real pain that we have, real emotions that we have. And when you do these things, it reduces us, it objectifies us, and it diminishes us and mocks us.
So have you knowingly engaged in digital blackface? Take a moment to reflect on that, you know. But ultimately, we want to create a community where we spike conversation, where we can engage in discourse. Please place your comments below so we can keep the conversation going. If you have gained any insight from this video, please shoot us a like.
Yeah.
And nothing else, subscribe to the video and hit that bell so next time we put a video up, you're informed about it and you can join into our next conversation.
Be safe out there, guys. Peace.